I'm not telling this story to scare anyone. I just think, maybe someone out there has been in the same situation I was. And if you ever find yourself in it, at least you'll know how to avoid it. Unlike me, who thought I was lucky, but clearly wasn't. Back then, I had just moved to Dalat for my first year of college. My family wasn't well off, so finding affordable housing was a real concern. I had tried living in the dorms, but they were noisy and crowded. Eating and studying was a hassle. So, when a classmate told me he knew of a cheap, quiet place to rent, I felt like I'd struck gold. He showed me a small rental near the forest edge, almost cut off from the neighborhood, with only a few houses around. The landlord was an older woman, not particularly friendly but not unpleasant either. She spoke calmly, rarely smiled, but didn't seem harsh. I came to check out the room on a gloomy afternoon, the chilly Dalat air lingering. The room was behind the main house. You had to walk around the side and through a small artichoke garden to get to it. It was separate, had its own bathroom, a low wooden bed, an old study desk, and a faded jackfruit wood wardrobe. Nothing fancy, but for 1.5 million Vietnamese dongs and no shared space with the landlord, it was a deal. I agreed to rent it immediately. The landlady only said one thing: "You can live here, but don't open the stone door in the corner of the room. It's not in use." I glanced over to that corner and saw a low, sealed door, its edges coated in what looked like cement, with a few scratch marks on the surface. I nodded without thinking much of it. The first few days living there were fine. The room was genuinely quiet. At night, you could hear the wind rustling through the pine trees. There was a lady who sold cheap meals nearby, just a 10-minute walk, so it was convenient. I spent time tidying up, laying out a fresh bedsheet, organizing my books, and hanging my jacket. I felt this odd sense of lightness, like I was beginning a whole new chapter, alone, free, no one to nag, no need to talk much. I'm a simple person, not superstitious, not curious, but after 2 weeks, I started noticing little things, so small that, if I told anyone, they'd probably laugh and say, "That's it?" The first thing was the desk. Every night, while studying, I heard a faint knock-knock, like someone lightly tapping their nails on the desk. At first, I thought it was just mice. The old wooden ceiling had signs of mice, and I'd seen a few. But the weird part? The tapping always happened around 2 or 3 a.m., and it was always 3 taps. No more, no less. One night, I suddenly woke up, not sure why. I looked at the clock, 3:04 a.m. I stayed still, eyes half shut, and then, knock, 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 3 soft taps echoed from the wall nearby. Not loud, not horrifying, but it chilled me to the bone. I sat up and looked around. Everything was in place. Windows closed, main door locked from the inside. Only the corner with the stone door remained still. I didn't tell anyone, thinking maybe I was imagining things. But after that, whenever I studied late at night, I always had the eerie feeling that someone was watching me from behind. You know that feeling, where someone's staring at you, but you can't bring yourself to turn around? It was sharp, real, but every time I turned, there was just the wall and the stone door. I once thought of hanging a small mirror on the wall to make shaving easier in the morning. But strangely, when I held the mirror, I suddenly didn't want to hang it anymore. Not out of fear, but a strange, hard to explain feeling, as if something might appear in the mirror if I stared too long. A kind of vague unease that sat heavy in my gut. I put the mirror back in the drawer, never took it out again. One afternoon, light rain was falling. I got home early to cook dinner. While rinsing rice, I heard the sound of water trickling behind me. I figured maybe rain had leaked in somewhere, so I grabbed a towel. But when I got to the door, I clearly saw water dripping from the crack of the stone door. Just a few drops, but on the dry tile floor. They formed a trail, as if someone had just stepped out. I stood staring for a few seconds, then told myself it was probably moisture seeping through the wall. But then, why was there only one trail? No spreading, no puddles, just one clean line, from the stone door to the center of the room. Then nothing. I wiped it up and tried not to think too much. But after that, every morning when I woke up, something in the room would be slightly off. One day, my jacket that was hung on the wall had fallen, though the hook was still perfectly intact. Another day, the pen I left on the desk had vanished, only to show up under the bed. Then one morning, the pencil I'd left half sharpened had been neatly sharpened to a fine tip. I started feeling scared, but more than scared, I felt confused. I didn't know who to talk to, because I wasn't even sure if I had done those things in my sleep. I didn't dare tell the landlady. Definitely didn't tell my parents. I began staying up later, keeping the lights on all night. Some nights, I lay awake until dawn. And one night, for the first time, I dreamed the room had no ceiling. I was standing in the middle of the room, surrounded by 4 walls, but above me, there was nothing, just an endless black void. On the floor, right by the stone door, someone was sitting with their back to me, dressed in white, long hair, so thin I could see their shoulder blades sticking out. They were scratching something into the tile with their fingernails. I walked closer, about to speak, but the figure stopped and turned their head. I couldn't see their face, only 2 deep eye sockets and a mouth that moved soundlessly. I couldn't hear a word, but in my mind, a voice echoed, "Don't call me. Don't open it." I jolted awake, drenched in sweat. I was still on my bed, but my notebook, the one I left on the desk, had been opened. And on the page, in messy, shaky handwriting, were the words, "I'm here." That morning, I locked the door and took a bus into town. Sat in a coffee shop until late afternoon before I dared return. But when I got back, nothing seemed off. The room looked the same. Clean, neat, silent, except the pencil that had snapped the night before had been re-sharpened with a razor blade. And the stone door had a new, small crack at the bottom corner. No one touched it. No one said a word. But I knew something was slowly making its way out. I don't know exactly when I started feeling like something was off about that room. Maybe it was the first time I heard the knocking at dawn. Or maybe it was that light rainy night, the one when I saw water seeping out from the crack in the stone door, forming a thin trail across the cold tile floor. But wherever it began, that feeling kept growing stronger. Like something was slowly getting closer, not rushing, not hurried, but steadily. Certainly, I was still living in that room. Nothing scary happened during the day. I still went to class. Still ate at the usual food stall. Some days I got so caught up in studying that I forgot the strange things that had happened. But every night, especially when the wind blew through the forest, the air turned cold, and the whole neighborhood fell silent. The room felt different, heavier, deeper, like something was watching me from some hidden corner I couldn't see. I told Tuan, my best friend from high school, now studying at another university in the city. After hearing everything, he just chuckled. "You live near the forest. It's cold. You're probably hallucinating. Plus, living alone makes your imagination run wild. I once rented a place near a cemetery and thought I saw a ghost. Turns out it was just the old neighbor going to the bathroom and forgetting to pull her pants up." I didn't blame him. Honestly, if it were me, I'd probably say the same thing. But only the person living it knows what it's really like. I didn't dare say I saw a ghost. But I knew there was something not right behind that stone door. That feeling of being watched never left me. One night while studying, I suddenly felt a chill down my spine. I turned around, nothing. But when I looked down at the desk, I saw that the pen I'd been writing with had somehow ended up in my left hand, even though I'm right-handed. Little things like that. If it happened once or twice, I might have brushed them off. But they kept happening, over and over, until I started asking myself, am I sleepwalking? Or worse, is someone else using my hands at night to do something? I started trying a few things. I sprinkled salt around the room, placed a handful of rice in front of the stone door, and hung a small wind chime by the window. Just things I'd heard people talk about. I didn't know if they actually worked. But strangely, after that night, I stopped dreaming about the person sitting on the floor. Instead, I began hearing whispers, very faint, very distant, like someone was standing out in the garden, calling my name in a voice that wasn't clearly male or female. At first, I would open the door to check, but no one was ever there. The landlady lived at the front of the property and never came into the garden at night. I knew, because I had paid attention. So who was out there? Or rather, what? There was one time I was washing my face in the bathroom when the water suddenly turned ice cold, even though the weather wasn't that cold. I looked up at the mirror, and clearly saw a shadow move behind me. I turned around, nothing. But in the mirror, the shadow was still there. Standing still, not moving, not turning. I froze for a few seconds, then grabbed a towel to cover my face and rushed out. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I dozed off, I jerked awake. I stayed up studying until nearly 2 a.m., then fell asleep at the desk without realizing it. At exactly 3 o'clock, I woke up to the knocking. 3 knocks, just like always, but this time, it came from inside the room. Not the desk, not the main door. It was the wooden wardrobe. I don't remember what I was thinking at that moment. I just remember my heart pounding like it was going to explode. I slowly got up and walked over to the wardrobe. My hand, trembling, reached for the handle. I opened it, nothing. Just a few shirts, some old books, and a box of medicine I'd forgotten a few days earlier. But as I was about to close it, my eyes caught something, a faint stain on the inside wall of the wardrobe. It looked like ink, but I could still read it. 3 knocks. Every night, call me out. I slammed the door shut and turned on every light in the room. I sat there until morning, eyes wide open, too afraid to blink. The next day at school, I looked exhausted. A classmate asked if I was sick. I just smiled and said, probably caught a cold, but deep down, I knew I was being pulled into something old, heavy, like that room had once trapped something that should have never existed. That evening, I took a utility knife and lightly scratched the edge of the stone door, just to see if there was any gap. I had only made a small cut when a strong, foul smell poured out. I couldn't tell if it was rotten fish, dried blood, or stagnant water, but it was awful. I covered my nose and tried to wipe it up, but the smell stuck to my hands. Even after using soap, it wouldn't go away. It lingered until evening, and while I was showering, I looked down at my ankle and saw a small bruise, round, like the shape of a fingertip. I don't know if I accidentally hit something, or if someone had grabbed me while I slept. I started writing a journal, documenting every strange thing that happened each day. Not to share, not to prove anything, but so that I myself would remember this wasn't something I made up. I know people will say I'm paranoid, but if you've ever lived alone, in an isolated place, hearing knocks every night, seeing your belongings move when no one touched them, you'd understand. And then, one night, I didn't hear the knocks anymore. Instead, I heard scratching, long, slow, like fingernails dragging across cement, from inside the stone door. I don't remember how I fell asleep that night, only that when I woke up, the sun was already rising. Faint rays of light slipped through the window cracks and stretched across the cold tile floor, making the room feel just a little less gloomy. I forced myself to ignore the scratching sounds from the night before. Told myself it was just rats, or maybe a wildcat running across the tin roof. But deep down, I wasn't at ease. I stepped outside, looking at the artichoke garden drenched in morning dew, then glanced back at the stone door in my room. The crack from yesterday was still there, but it looked smaller. I wasn't sure if my eyes were playing tricks on me, or if something really had changed. That day I was at school all day. I stayed at the campus library on purpose, not heading home until almost 6 p.m. Then I wandered around the market for a while, buying some dry groceries just to stretch out the time. I didn't want to go back early, not because I was scared, but because I didn't know what I'd be facing when I returned. It felt like home was no longer a place to come back to. That night, I cooked a quick dinner and started studying early. I turned on every light, both the desk lamp and ceiling light, and even played soft music on my laptop, hoping that the sound and brightness would chase away whatever strange feeling was hanging in the air. But the more I tried to forget, the clearer it became. Around 10 p.m., when everything began to fall silent, I heard it again. A soft rustling sound, right beside the wall, like papers brushing together. I stood up and pressed my ear to the wall. Nothing. I turned to head back to the desk but suddenly noticed a tiny crack down near the base of the wall, just behind the small bookshelf. I grabbed a flashlight and aimed it in. Inside the crack, there was paper. I couldn't tell what kind, but I clearly saw the yellowed tone of old sheets. I pushed the shelf aside and used a cutter to gently pry at the wall. The plaster crumbled easily, like loose dust. Bit by bit, I scraped it away. Finally, I pulled out a small folded piece of paper, yellowed and smeared with ink. I opened it. The handwriting was shaky, some parts darker, others faint, but I could still read the line in the middle. They locked me in here. No one believed me. If you're reading this, don't let them do it again. I dropped the note. My body turned cold. Who wrote this? Locked in where? Behind the stone door? Did someone used to live here? I tucked the paper into a notebook, planning to ask the landlady the next day. But I didn't get the chance. Because that night, something even stranger happened. I had another dream. But this time, it wasn't about the person sitting on the floor. This time, I dreamed I was sitting in my room, everything exactly the same. The desk, the bed, the lights, everything. I was studying when the stone door slowly began to open. From within, a hand reached out, bony, long, ghostly pale, with sharp, overgrown fingernails. The hand was holding a pencil. Then I saw myself, in the dream, stand up, walk over to the door, take the pencil, and start writing on the wall next to the stone door. Writing fast, furiously, in jagged letters I couldn't make out. The lines twisted like vines. When my dream self, finished, he turned to look at me. His face was mine, but with sunken eyes and cracked lips. And he whispered, "I've written, now it's your turn." I woke up drenched in sweat, my shirt collar soaked. I turned on the lights and looked around. The room was exactly the same, but when I stepped over to the wall near the stone door, I saw pencil marks, faint, twisted strokes, like someone had scribbled on the wall with a pencil. The lines were long, crooked, and unreadable. I reached out to rub them, but they didn't fade. I tried to laugh it off, to calm myself, but inside, I was so afraid I couldn't bring myself to turn off the lights all night. I lay down, but I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those sunken eyes staring straight into me, like they were waiting for me to write next. And the thing that creeped me out the most was that pencil, the one I lost 3 days earlier, was now lying neatly on the desk. Freshly sharpened, the tip razor sharp like new. I don't know if someone is controlling me, or if I'm no longer truly myself anymore. I started counting the days I had left in that room, not to mark any kind of milestone, but to remind myself how much longer until the lease ended. Every morning when I woke up, the first thing I did wasn't brushing my teeth or making coffee. It was looking toward the stone door in the corner. Still closed, but the feeling, it never felt truly completely closed. I told Tuan, my best friend, about the pencil marks. He still didn't believe me. He said, "You're stressed, studying too much, not sleeping enough. It's normal to imagine things. If you're feeling off, then move out. Why stay? Move out?" I wanted to, but a place this cheap in Dalat was rare. And honestly, I wasn't even sure that if I left, those strange things wouldn't follow me. At this point, I wasn't so sure it was just the room anymore. Maybe it was me. Maybe I'd seen something I wasn't supposed to. That night, I didn't study. I grabbed a thin blanket and sat outside in the yard. Dalat's night air was cold. The mist soaked through my jacket and into my hair. I looked out toward the pine forest. The tall trees stood like black silhouettes in the dark. In the distance, a dog barked, soft, scattered sounds that somehow made the night feel even more empty. After about 10 minutes, I went back in, locked the door, double-checked every power socket, turned off the lights, and laid down. I told myself that if I had another dream tonight, I wouldn't follow the shadowy figure again. But once I fell asleep, things went a different way. I dreamed I woke up in the middle of the night, still in that room, but everything was covered in a thick, white mist. The room had no light, except for a faint glow coming from the stone door. And this time, it was open. I saw myself, in the dream, walk toward it, then kneel down. From within the crack, a thin, bony hand reached out and rested on my forehead. The moment it touched me, I heard a voice, not in my ears, but inside my head. "You haven't written enough. Keep writing. I have so much more to say." I jolted awake. The room lights were still on. The soft music was still playing on my laptop. But the sheet of paper I'd left blank on the desk the night before now had 3 new lines written on it. The pencil strokes were deep, pressed hard into the page. I picked it up and read. I was tricked. No one saved me. That door didn't trap me, it trapped something else. Don't let it out. My hands let go. The paper fell to the floor. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. I couldn't even stand properly, had to sit down on the bed. Those words weren't in my handwriting, but the pencil used to write them was the one I kept in my drawer. The next morning, I told the landlady what had happened. She stayed silent. Then, after a long pause, she finally said, "That room used to be rented by a girl. Very sweet, smart, good student, but then, she dropped out and disappeared. The police came to investigate, but they found nothing. Her family eventually moved away." I asked, "Do you know her name?" The landlady answered slowly. Her name was Diem. The girl's name was Diem. I went back to my room, opened my phone, and typed, "Missing person Dalat, girl named Diem." No official news came up, just an old forum post about a female student who went missing mysteriously while staying near the forest. Her family said she was depressed and ran away, but one of the comments below said that the night before she disappeared, Diem had written to a friend saying, "I hear someone calling me from behind the wall." I closed the phone, my head buzzing. At that point, I had no more doubts. I had been continuing someone else's story. Or more accurately, I was being forced to continue it. But continue it for who? For what purpose? And what exactly was waiting behind that stone door? That night, I tried something. I took the thickest notebook I had, placed a pencil neatly on the desk, and turned on my laptop camera to record overnight, pointed directly at the desk. If anything happened, I wanted it on video. I fell asleep sometime around 2 a.m. when I woke up. Everything looked the same, but in the notebook, another page was filled with writing. Same strange letters, slanted, messy, curling across the page. I opened my laptop and reviewed the footage. At exactly 3:02 a.m., clear as day, the pencil started to move on its own. No one was holding it. It stood upright, then glided across the page like an invisible hand was writing. It wrote continuously for nearly a minute, then stopped. Fell over by itself. That's when I shut the laptop. And that same morning, I called home. My voice was trembling. "Mom, Dad, I think I need to move out." After that morning phone call with my parents, I kept going back and forth between staying and leaving. My dad said immediately, "If you don't feel right, just move out. We'll manage the money. But your health and peace of mind are more important." My mom was gentler. She just asked if I was eating okay. Then reminded me, "If that place really makes you uneasy, don't force yourself. You live alone. If something happens, who's going to help you?" I knew they were worried, but I also knew not everything can be explained. I couldn't tell my mom I had footage of a pencil writing on its own, with no hand holding it. Couldn't say that things were happening that I, as a small town guy studying in Dalat, completely couldn't understand. I asked them to give me a few days to think it over, then hung up. That afternoon, heavy rain fell. In Dalat, when it rains, the mist rolls in fast. It was only 5 p.m. but already felt like night. I sat in my room, hesitating to turn on the lights, just staring out the window. Rain streaked down the glass. Outside, the pine forest swayed in the wind, like someone was slowly walking between the trees. Suddenly, I saw a reflection in the window. A person's silhouette. I spun around, no one. But when I looked back at the glass, the figure was still there. Standing behind me, face unclear, just a thin figure, long hair, bony shoulders, standing still, unmoving. I turned fully around, nothing. Looked again at the window, the reflection was gone. I didn't scream, I didn't run, I just sat there for a long time. My heartbeat slowed, but my ears were still ringing from the tension. I knew this was beyond what I could handle alone. That night, I gathered pomelo leaves, salt, and a small knife, things people say can ward off spirits, and placed them around the room. I set a bowl of salt water in front of the stone door. All I wanted was for the night to be quiet. But that night turned out to be one of the strangest since I moved in. I dreamed I came home from school, opened the door, and everything in the room had been rearranged. The bed was turned around, the desk faced the wall, and the wardrobe had been moved right up against the stone door. And on the wall, there was a long line of black writing, written in charcoal. "I've waited too long. There's no one else, only you." I woke up with a jolt. Everything in the room looked exactly the same, but when I stepped out of bed, my left foot hit something small and hard. I bent down to pick it up. It was a piece of charcoal. The kind used to light a stove, but I'd never bought or brought anything like that into the room. I put it in a box, then called Tuan, my best friend. This time, I told him everything. I didn't hold anything back. Tuan stayed quiet for a while, then said, "I don't think you're making it up." But hearing this, yeah, it freaks me out too. Maybe it's not just a ghost. Maybe it's something older, something tied to that house from a long time ago. You should try looking into what used to be there. His words made me think. The next evening, I went to an internet cafe near school and looked up local records. Just as I'd suspected, the area where my rental was used to be part of an abandoned religious compound. There had been a fire in 1998, half the building burned down. Only a few rooms in the back remained, what was now the rental section. In the list of those missing after the fire, there was a name, Nguyen T. Diem, a college student who stayed to tutor at night. Her body was never found. I closed the browser and walked home feeling like a rock was pressing on my chest. That name, Diem, the girl the landlady had mentioned, the one I'd heard calling me in dreams, the one who had written, "I was locked in." That night, I wrote a line on paper. "If you are Diem, please tell me what you need." Then I placed a pencil gently on the page, left it on the desk, and went to sleep. I didn't dream, but the next morning, the page had 2 new words. "Help me." I looked down at my hand, on my left wrist. There was a black ink stain stretching from my fingertip to my forearm. As if I, or someone using my hand, had written that all night long. And when I stepped into the bathroom to wash it off, in the mirror, I saw a girl with long hair standing right behind me. Her eyes wide open, her mouth said nothing, she just stood there and stared. After that night, I stopped looking in the bathroom mirror. Every time I washed my face, I turned my back to the mirror, kept my head low, rushed through it, and walked out right away. That woman's reflection in the mirror, it wasn't a hallucination. I knew that clearly. The feeling of someone standing just inches behind me, their cold breath brushing against my ear. That's something I can never forget. And I knew she, Diem, wanted me to do something. But what? Did she want to be saved? Or was she trying to pull me into wherever she once was? I started sleeping less. Every time I slept, I dreamt. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw words. One morning, I woke up to find ink stains in the palm of my hand. No idea when I wrote them. Other nights, I'd jolt awake because of faint scratching noises at the stone door, gentle but long, like someone with sharp nails dragging across dry cement. I became so consumed by it that I bought a new notebook and began writing everything down, every dream, every feeling, every little sign. I kept telling myself I had to stay sane, to stay in control, not let this slip out of my hands. One afternoon, while sorting through my stuff, trying to toss out things I didn't need, I came across the bottom drawer of the old wooden cabinet. The same cabinet where I'd once seen the writing, 3 knocks. Every night, call me out. The drawer's base felt a little loose, so I pried at it with my fingernail. Beneath the wooden panel was a small hollow space, and inside was an old notebook, tied with a brittle rubber band. I pulled it out, blew off the dust, and carefully opened it. The first page read, "Diary of Diem." I sat down, hands shaking, and kept reading. The handwriting was small and neat, though in some parts it looked rushed, uneven. The first few entries were ordinary, about school, her family, tutoring jobs, having dinner alone. Then the entries began to shift. This room was peaceful at first, but around the 10th night, I started hearing scratching. I told the landlady. She just stayed quiet. I asked about the stone door. She said it was an old storage space. Unused. But I know, if it's unused, why do I hear knocking from inside it every night? I left paper and pen in front of the door. The next day, it said, "I'm cold." The more I read, the colder my hands felt. It was like reading about exactly what I was going through, but written by someone else. At a different time. The last page of the diary made my whole body tense. If anyone ever finds this, please help me. I don't want to be here anymore. But I can't leave. I'm being held, not by human hands, but by unspoken promises and lingering resentment. Don't let me become part of the wall. Don't let anyone else end up like me. And at the very bottom, in faint red ink, or maybe something else, was one final line. The stone door isn't locked with a key. It's locked with blood. I slammed the diary shut and stuffed it into my bag, zipping it tight. What I felt wasn't fear anymore, it was coldness. Cold from the inside. I had no more doubts. Everything was repeating. Diem had been haunted, had seen what I was seeing, had written what I was now writing. And now, maybe she wasn't just someone who once lived here. Maybe she was what's still here. In this room, behind that wall. I called Tuan and said quickly. I found Diem's diary. She lived here. She heard the scratching. She wrote in her sleep, just like me. I think I'm about to become the next one. Tuan went silent for a moment, then said, "Then you have to leave. Right now. Or, you have to open the door. End it." I hung up and sat there in silence for a while. Then I picked up a pen and wrote on a blank piece of paper placed in front of the stone door. "If you are Diem, I'll help you. But please tell me what to do." I left it there and went to bed early. At midnight, I woke up to scratching, but this time, it wasn't soft. It was loud, aggressive, like someone was furiously clawing through the cement, layer by layer by layer. I jumped out of bed. Before I could even turn on the light, a small, old, folded piece of paper slipped out from the crack in the stone door. My hands trembled as I picked it up. I unfolded it slowly. Just one sentence. Open the door, before I'm no longer me. I sat still for a long time, hands still clutching the piece of paper Diem left behind. Not because I was reading it, but because I didn't know what to do next. That sentence, "Open the door, before I'm no longer me," felt like a desperate final plea. But it could also be a trap. Maybe whatever was behind that door wasn't really the girl named Diem anymore. Maybe even she didn't know what was controlling her. It was still dark outside. The clock showed it was past 3 a.m. The wind whistled through the roof, making a long, strained sound like someone forcing a whistle through their throat. I didn't dare sleep again. I cleared a spot and sat with my back against the wall, directly facing the stone door. Right in front of me, low, dusty, with fresh scratches around the edges, clearer than before, as if someone from the other side was trying to claw their way out. Inch by inch, I pulled out my phone, turned on the flashlight, and shined it straight at the door. Nothing seemed different, but in the light, I noticed something I'd never seen before, right beside the handle. There was a small indentation. I stepped closer and touched it. My skin turned cold, like I'd just dipped my fingers in ice water. The indentation wasn't from wear or time. Its shape looked like a handprint. 5 fingers, complete. I stood up, went to the back of the kitchen, and found the oil lamp. I lit it. The warm yellow light was easier on the eyes than the flashlight. I placed the lamp right by the stone door, then returned to my desk and flipped open Diem's journal, looking for any entry about the door. There was one page I hadn't paid close attention to. She had written, "The scratching sounds aren't always the same. Some nights they're soft, some nights desperate, as if sometimes she's still herself. Other times, she's something else. I'm not sure who I'll meet if I open the door. But I can't not open it. Because if I don't, the dreams won't stop." I thought about myself. How many nights had I dreamed of writing? Of my hand no longer being my own? Dreamed of looking into a mirror and not seeing my own eyes staring back? I knew, if I stayed here any longer, sooner or later, I'd be just like Diem. Either disappear, or be replaced. I stood up. For the first time, I dared to walk straight to the stone door and place my hand on the handle. Cold, hard, my hand trembled, but I didn't pull back. I turned it slightly. It wouldn't open, still sealed from the inside. I stepped back, grabbed the utility knife from my desk drawer, and returned. I began slicing along the edge of the old cement seams. The plaster crumbled easily, flaking off like dry skin. Dust filled the air each time the blade scraped across. I heard a faint hiss, uncertain if it was from the wall or from within. Finally, I managed to pry open a small crack. A cold draft seeped through, carrying the damp smell of soil and a faint metallic scent, rust. Maybe. I grabbed both sides of the frame and pulled hard. The door gave way. A deep darkness opened before me. I held the lamp up. Inside was a small room. Stone walls, stone floor, barely the size of a cramped cell. But what sent chills through my body was, in the middle of the room sat an old wooden chair. And on it, a neatly folded girl's school uniform. A white blouse, black skirt. On top of it, a piece of paper. The handwriting was unmistakable. I used to sit here. I used to wait. But now, I don't know what I am anymore. If you've opened the door, please keep your word. Let me go. I turned to the right and saw a small photo hanging by a frayed red string. The photo showed a girl with long hair. A kind, gentle face, wearing a school uniform. Below the photo it read, Nguyen T. Diem 1998. I lit an incense stick and placed it beside the chair. I didn't know what else to do. I stayed silent for a long time, then slowly stepped back. I didn't dare close the door. I didn't dare stay in that room any longer. That night, I didn't hear the scratching anymore. I didn't dream of anything, either. But just before I went to sleep, I saw a new line written neatly on my desk. Thank you. You kept your word. But there's one more thing I have to take with me. After the night I opened the door, I slept straight through until morning. For the first time in weeks, I didn't dream. No knocking, no scratching, no one wrote using my hands. I thought it was over. But it turned out, that was just the calm before another wave. That morning, I woke up to find the room unusually light, as if something heavy, but invisible, had been swept clean. I walked around, checking everything again. The stone door was still open. The small room inside was still empty. The school uniform still rested neatly on the chair. Diem's photo still swayed gently in the breeze. I had no intention of closing it. I thought, if a soul had truly been trapped there, then now she had been released. But in my mind, her final words from the night before still echoed. There's one more thing I have to take with me. I didn't quite understand, but I thought maybe it was something from her past, or a piece of memory that hadn't found peace. That entire day, I felt like I was waiting for a sign, a dream, something to continue the story. But nothing came, until evening. I had just turned off the lights and was about to lie down when my phone rang. An unknown number. I answered. Hello? Are you the one renting the back room at Mrs. Tho's place? A middle-aged man's voice. I paused. Yes, that's me. Is there something wrong? I'm Diem's cousin, the girl who used to live there. I heard from Mrs. Tho that you found her diary. Could I meet with you? I hesitated for a moment, then agreed. 2 days later, the man showed up, tall, thin, with a weary face. As soon as he saw me, he said directly, Thank you, Mrs. Tho explained, and I understand some of it now. But are you sure Diem really came back? I didn't know how to answer. I just handed him the diary. He held it, flipped through a few pages, then stopped and stared for a long time at the last entry. Then he pulled an old photo from his wallet and gave it to me. In the photo was Diem, long hair, white blouse, sitting in the courtyard of an old house. Behind her was a low cement post, the same one beside the stone door. I looked closely, my heart pounding. There was another figure in the photo, a little girl, about 5 or 6 years old, peeking from behind the post. Only half her face was visible. I asked, Who's that? He answered softly, That was the maid girl back then. They called her Nan. No one knew her real name. After the fire, she disappeared too. People assumed she died in the storage room, but no body was ever found. I held the photo up, staring hard, even with just half a face. She looked familiar, so familiar. Then it hit me, once. In the bathroom mirror, I'd seen a strange reflection. Not Diem, smaller, short hair, standing below my shoulder line. I said that out loud. Diem's cousin listened, then shook his head slowly. Then maybe it's not over. Maybe Diem was only part of it. And Nan is the forgotten one. That night, I didn't dare sleep. I placed the photo in front of the stone door. Beneath it, I wrote, "Nan, if you're still here, do you need help?" Around midnight, I dozed off briefly, then heard a soft rustling near the desk. I opened my eyes but didn't move. At the edge of the desk, the piece of paper beside the photo was slowly being pulled. Like a small hand was dragging it into the shadows. I turned on the light. No one was there, but now, the paper had a new line written in faint pencil. "I have no name. No one calls me. No one remembers. I want to leave too." I collapsed into my chair. It felt like I'd reached the bottom of a deep well. There are souls that don't hold grudges. They're just forgotten. No one calls their name. No one remembers they ever existed. I wrote back, "Then your name is Nan. From now on, I will remember you." I placed that paper right by the stone door. The next morning, the writing was gone. In its place was a small piece of fabric, singed with soot. I understood. One soul had been set free, and another had finally found her name and could move on. But I also understood this. This room was never just a rental. It had been a place for holding forgotten souls. And maybe someone else is still here, waiting for me to call their name. After the night I called out Nan's name and received that burned piece of cloth, the room began to feel lighter. The air wasn't as heavy anymore. The morning breeze no longer carried that sharp chill that made the hairs on my neck stand up. I thought, maybe it was all finally coming to an end. But I was wrong. 4 days passed in quiet. I went to class, came home, cooked, studied. Each night before sleeping, I lit a single stick of incense in front of the stone door, not as a prayer. Just a greeting, a sign of respect. I didn't hear any more knocking. Didn't dream of Diem or Nan. But deep inside, something still felt unfinished, as if one part of the story was still waiting. Then came Saturday night. I had no class the next day and planned to sleep early. The lights had only been off for half an hour when I heard a soft clicking sound from the ceiling. I turned the lights back on and looked up. Nothing unusual. But then, the notebook on my desk began flipping pages, one by one. Slowly, even though the window was tightly closed. I walked over and turned to the last page. A single new line had been added. There are still more, those who were never named. I didn't know who wrote it. Maybe Diem, maybe Nan, or maybe someone else. But my chest tightened. I looked around the room, every corner, and then stepped into the small chamber behind the stone door. The oil lamp had long since gone out, but in the faint darkness, I saw a piece of paper placed on the wooden chair. Not mine, not Diem's. I picked it up and read it. Just 2 lines, written in completely different handwriting. I was the floor cleaner. No one ever asked my name. I was here before even Diem. For the first time, I felt a different kind of fear. Not of strange noises or shadows, but of the presence of people, or rather, souls, who had existed so quietly. They'd been completely forgotten. People with no names on any list. No one mourned them, no one remembered, but they were still here. Part of the walls, the floor, the bones of the house. I searched the room with my light, looked for any trace, any sign, and behind the old wooden cabinet, I noticed one patch of wall darker than the rest. I pulled the cabinet away and shone my light. It looked like a section had been sealed over with newer cement, though still old and stained. I took a small knife and carefully chipped at it. Within minutes, I uncovered an old plastic ID card. The letters were faded, but still legible. Nguyen Van Lu, janitor. I held the card in my hand, and my fingers trembled. That man, unknown to everyone, might have once worked in this house. Maybe in the religious compound before it burned down. And maybe he died quietly, without a death certificate, without family, without anyone to call his name. I took a piece of paper and wrote, "Uncle Lou, I know your name now." Then I placed the ID card on my desk beside the incense stick. That night, I didn't dream, but the next morning, the card was gone. In its place, a small piece of wood, etched with a crude flower, like someone had carved it using a dull blade. I placed my hand on it. The surface felt warm. I didn't know what I was supposed to feel. Relief? Peace? Or fear? There was something inside me that felt both calm and unbearably heavy. Because I realized, after everything, this room, this house, still held others. Others who had lived here, died quietly here, and were never remembered. I decided to do something I hadn't considered before. I wouldn't move out. I would stay. I would write down the names of everyone I found. I would light incense for each of those names. If fate placed me in this room, then I would make sure they were never forgotten again. That night, I opened my laptop, created a new file, and titled it, Those Who Were Never Named. On the first page, I wrote, Nguyen T. Diem 1998. Little Non, birth year unknown. Nguyen Van Lu, janitor. I don't know how long the list will grow, but I know, I will keep writing. And then, as I hit save from the corner of the room, behind the stone door, I heard 3 soft knocks, like fingers tapping gently, gratefully, on a wooden table. I don't know when it started, but somehow I had grown used to living with those who couldn't be seen. Every night before bed, I would still light an incense stick, open my laptop, and look over the list of names I had written. There were 3, each with a story, each a piece of the wall, a fragment of memory that, if I hadn't touched, would have remained forgotten forever. After the last time I heard those 3 soft knocks from the stone door, I didn't dream again. No footsteps, no scribbled notes, no eyes staring at me from the mirror. But deep inside, I knew there were still more. I started cleaning the small room behind the stone door. I wiped the stone floor, swept away the cobwebs, placed the wooden chair in a well-lit corner, and laid a white cloth over it. I no longer saw it as a prison. I wanted to turn it into a resting place for those who had once been here. On my desk, I framed a small sign that read, Please remember them. In the days that followed, I spoke with Mrs. Tho, the landlady. I told her everything, held nothing back. She listened for a long time, her face turning solemn. Then she sighed. I used to feel something too, but I didn't have the courage to face it. Now that you've done it, maybe those children can finally rest. I asked if she remembered anyone else who had lived there. She just shook her head. It was a long time ago. Dear, this place used to be storage. Only later did we turn it into student housing. Some stayed long, some just a few months. Some disappeared, some left without a word. I understood. Some names would never be known. But at the very least, I could make room for them. A blank line on the list. A single stick of incense, to say they were once human. I told Tuan, my best friend, about everything. After listening, he stayed quiet for a while, then said, I never thought you would be the one to do this. But maybe if it wasn't you, then no one would have done it. I smiled, not because I was happy, but because I finally understood. The room I once feared, once wanted to run away from, had chosen me. And I wasn't afraid of it anymore. On the last day of my rental contract, I packed up all my things and cleaned everything. But that room, I left untouched. I didn't close the stone door. I didn't seal it with cement again. I just placed an oil lamp right at the threshold. Half a wick still remained. I stood at the door and lit one final incense stick. The wind blew gently. No chill, no rot, nothing held me back, but nothing pushed me away either. I bowed my head and softly said, I'm about to leave, but I'll remember you all. And if there's anyone whose name hasn't been spoken, please don't worry. I'll come back. As I walked out the front gate, the sun was just beginning to rise. Along the dirt path leading to the main road, wildflowers bloomed on both sides. There wasn't a single sound, but inside, I felt filled with voices. With each step, it felt like someone was smiling as they saw me off. No bitterness, no anger, just farewell. And as I reached the end of the slope, I don't know why, but I turned around, just to glance at that room one last time. The stone door had closed itself. On its own, quietly, like a silent thank you. I gave a small nod, then turned away, this time, truly leaving. The door had closed, but not to seal things away. It had closed to bring peace, to gently lay to rest all the unspoken grief, the unnamed things, the forgotten souls left in the dark. That room, once just a temporary place to stay, turned out to be a vessel of memory, A place where the nameless had been waiting for someone, just to be remembered. If you've stayed with me this far, thank you, for walking with me to the end of a journey. Where fear didn't come from blood or screams, but from being forgotten. If this story has made you slow down, even for a moment, to look deeper at the things that seem old, small, or overlooked in life, then maybe those souls have truly found peace. Until we meet again, in another story, another room, another secret, where the shadows still whisper.